One day, when he heard people singing his biggest hit on a beach, Eddie Vedder went up to them and asked them to stop singing immediately. You might think that was an overreaction or ungrateful, but when I tell you the painful story behind Pearl Jam's song Black, you'll understand. I'm Guilherme and you're watching DECIFRAHITS.
Oh, been washed in black.
Tattooed everything. Black is one of the most impactful songs that a rock fan can know. Anyone who watches Eddie Vedder singing this classic might wonder where this intense emotion that the vocalist conveys comes from, the kind that gives anyone goosebumps. Well, there's an explanation for that. What we see here is not a theatrical performance or an act. Black carries a real story about something that shattered the singer's dreams and threw him into a downward spiral straight to rock bottom. Vedder just wanted to express his deepest pain in a song, hoping that only a few people would hear it. But with the immense talent and dedication of this artist, success was inevitable. And in a short time, Vedder was already being labeled as the voice of a generation, a position he never wanted to be in. But why did fame torture Vedder so much? And what was the reason he wrote this song? To understand that, we need to go back to the year 1990. That year, the city of Seattle was being dominated by alternative rock bands in what became known as the Grunge movement. Among these bands, Mother Love Bone stood out, whose lead singer, Andrew Wood, died of an overdose. The remaining members, like guitarist Stan Gossard and bassist Jeff Emmett, eventually got together with the intention of forming a new band, but they still needed a lead singer. For that, they had an idea. They released a demo tape with 5 instrumental songs in order to find someone who could record good vocals over them. At first, they gave the tape to Jack Irons, former drummer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, to see if he would be interested in joining the band. Irons turned down the invitation but sent the tape to a friend of his from San Diego who worked as a gas station attendant. This friend was none other than Eddie Vedder. Vedder recorded his vocals for 3 of these demos. Alive, Alive.
Alive. And
Footsteps. But there was something different about the way Vedder sang and wrote. Besides singing with all his soul, his lyrics spoke of painful, real stories about himself and people he knew. Gossard and Emmett were so impressed with the vocals that they had Vedder fly from San Diego to Seattle for an audition. On the plane, Vedder kept listening to the demos to get more inspiration. I started dealing with things I hadn't dealt with yet, and they brought out things from inside me that hadn't surfaced yet. Said Vedder about listening to Gossard's demos. One of those demos in particular was the one that stirred something the most inside Vedder. The one that was called E-Ballad. When he heard those deep and emotional instrumentals, Vedder put everything he had into it. Being quick-witted, he grabbed a pen and wrote the lyrics to Ibala right there on the plane, which would later be known.
Black.
In just 1 week, Vedder was already in the band, which then became known as Pearl Jam. And the very next year, in '91, Pearl Jam released their acclaimed debut studio album, 10. And thanks to hits like Jeremy,
Spalding precedent.
even Float. And of course, Black itself, the album reached a level that the band didn't expect, and even less wanted or was prepared for. 10 became one of the best-selling rock albums in history, and one of the most influential of the 90s. The band held an emergency meeting to discuss the direction they were taking. We need to draw a line so this doesn't go too far, they said, and that line was drawn exactly at Black. Because despite the pressure from the managers at Epic Records, the band refused to release this song as a single, let alone as a music video. They wanted to avoid what happened to Jeremy from happening to Black. Just so you understand the power that music videos had at the time, before the release of the Jeremy video, the album 10 had sold about 500,000 copies. But after the video started playing on music television, the album surpassed 5 million copies sold. Vedder even commented, I had the feeling that if we got more popular than we already were, we would be crushed, or our heads would explode like grapes. Vedder not only had an aversion to popularity, he also valued preserving the true meaning of his songs. That's not why we make music. We don't write trying to make hits. Some songs are fragile and get crushed by the industry. I don't want to be involved, and I don't think the band does either. And he also added, talking about the song Black, that there are certain songs that are born from emotion. It has nothing to do with melody, timing, or words. It's the emotion behind the music. You can't just give 50% of yourself. You need to sing with your feelings. And when asked why Black didn't become a music video, Vedder replied, "Before music videos, people used to listen to songs with their headphones on, sitting in an armchair with their eyes closed. And then your mind would create its own visions, those things that come from within. But now, sometimes even the first time you hear a song, it already comes together. And that robs you of any form of self-expression." Eddie even called radio stations himself to ask if the label had released Black as a single without his permission. Despite that, and all the band's resistance, Black was a huge success, becoming the third most played rock song in the United States in '93. That year, Eddie Vedder was devastated. He had become an artist depressed and tormented by his own success. Vedder's problem wasn't with fame itself, but with what comes with it. A lot of people start to think that you can change or save their lives, and they create impossible expectations for you, which in the end just destroys you inside. In fact, after Pearl Jam's iconic performance on music television Unplugged in '92, the number of letters sent to the band doubled. Many of them were about Black, and they always started the same way. "Your music saved my life." He wasn't against the song's success either, but rather against the excessive idolization of artists, as he himself said. "There shouldn't be any messiah in music. Some people tell me, you really helped me through a tough time with a certain song you wrote. And I always tell them, you overcame the problem. The song might have been like a lifeboat for a minute there, but I know what they're talking about because I've been through it myself." With the unwanted success, Eddie Vedder even thought about leaving the band to become an independent artist and sell his songs directly to people from his own home. It was that simplicity from the beginning of his career that Vedder missed. As he mentioned in the book Pearl Jam 20 before the first album, "We lived in a basement. I used to pee in bottles and just didn't want to get a parking ticket. Today, I feel way too far from that basement." If Vedder was feeling depressed, things would get even worse after a tragic event. His friend Stephanie Sargent, lead singer of the band 7 Year Bitch, had just lost her life after an accident. Vedder was devastated and decided to get away from all the chaos of fame in the city. He isolated himself in mourning in a deserted coastal region. One day, he was sitting on the edge of a cliff facing the sea, contemplating the loss of his friend, when strange voices began to echo behind him. They started getting louder and louder, and curiously, they were singing a familiar song. Vedder's confused look soon turned into a depressed expression and a deep sigh of discontent. He had isolated himself from society to grieve, but there were people singing that song, which, to him, symbolized the band's excessive popularity. The song Black. It was supposed to be a normal occurrence, considering it was a song that had become a hit on the radio. But in that moment of vulnerability and grief, that hurt Vedder in a way he didn't expect. He went up to the group and, extremely irritated, ordered everyone to stop singing the song immediately. Of course, people were left confused, and he ended up having to leave because he had been recognized. But as strange as that episode seemed, the issue went beyond that grief and fame. The song Black affected Vedder in a different way than the others, since its lyrics were inspired by something that happened in his teenage years and shattered him forever. When he was 17 years old, Eddie Vedder was cast in a play along with Liz Gamble, a student from a grade below Vedder. A year after that play, they started an intense relationship and, according to their friends, became inseparable. At the time, Vedder was going through serious family problems and found emotional comfort in his relationship with Liz. According to an article in Rolling Stone magazine, when Liz traveled to spend vacation with her family, Vedder wore her scarf around his neck every day until she came back. But when she returned, she ended her relationship with Vedder, which was a very strong emotional blow for him. According to his friends, his world collapsed at that moment. In the midst of his chaotic life and family conflicts, Vedder lost all his refuge and peace. And in a desperate attempt to escape everything that reminded him of Liz, he dropped out of school with only 6 months left to graduate and ended up moving from Illinois, his home state, to Chicago. But even after that, Vedder took a long time to recover. And only a few years later, he managed to get all that pain off his chest and synthesize it into what became the song Black. Empty painting canvases, untouched sheets of clay, spread out before me like her body once was. What was once full of color and shape, like painting canvases and clay molds, became dead and empty for Vedder. In these lines, we also notice that they probably had an intimate moment together, which marked him forever. All 5 horizons orbited around his soul, just like the Earth around the sun. In other words, his world revolved around her. And pay close attention to the analogy he makes here, comparing Liz to the sun, because this explains something at the end of the song. Besides that, the sun represents something grand, unattainable, and that brings vital energy, exactly what he saw in her. Now, all the air that I tasted and breathed has taken another direction, and I taught her everything, and she gave me everything she had. These lines once again indicate that it's about the power of a first intimacy. As he mentioned in the book Pearl Jam 20, Black is about first relationships, the song is about letting go. I've heard that it's impossible to have true love unless it's unrequited love, which is tough because that way, the truest love is the one you can never have forever. Now, my bitter hands rub beneath the clouds of what once was everything. All the pictures have been completely washed in black, tattooing everything. Vedder rubs his hands as if trying to feel something that was once so tangible, but today is something ethereal or intangible, like a cloud. Furthermore, here the images represent the memories of his relationship, while the black represents the emptiness and sadness that are tattooed on him, since his loss has marked him forever. And now my bitter hands gather shards of glass from what was once everything. All the love went wrong, turning my world into darkness. It tattooed everything I see, everything I am, and everything I will be. About the lyrics, Vedder commented, "It's a true story, something I really felt, and I still feel it every time I sing." And that's only amplified by the fact that Vedder gives more and more of himself as the song progresses. And he keeps going until he reaches what I consider the most emotional part of the lyrics. I know that one day you'll have a wonderful life. I know you'll be a star in someone else's sky. Here he shows the maturity of wishing the best for his beloved, even knowing he won't have her anymore. And even knowing how hard that is. The interesting thing is that now she's no longer the sun. She's so distant that today she's a star in someone else's sky. But why? Why can't it be in mine? Seriously, if you've never gotten goosebumps listening to this man, listen again. You're listening wrong. Songs like Black need to be appreciated the way Eddie Vedder mentioned, with headphones on, sitting down, and with your eyes closed, since many times they hold the deepest pains of an artist. Just like this song here.
Nela, Chester Bennington revela um trauma que o consumiu desde a sua infância até os últimos dias da sua vida. Para saber mais sobre essa história, é só clicar nesse vídeo. Muito obrigado pela sua companhia e te espero no próximo vídeo.